Hey guys, today I have on the show Greg Hickman he's the founder and CEO of Systemly, which is system.ly. He's built his company around his passion of helping entrepreneurs create more purpose, profit, and predictability in their businesses so they can spend more time on the things they love. This mission is near and dear to my heart, so I've asked Greg to join us here today to talk more about his strategies, tips, and tools for scaling, systematizing, and automating his business. Greg, thanks so much for taking the time today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. So little background that won't take forever is, graduated college marketing degree, went into an agency representing large brands, Pepsi, Unilever, Gatorade, all that stuff. So since then, I've been kind of from big agency representing big brands into small agencies representing big brands into startup companies as well. Then before I left to go on my own, I was actually client side building out an internal marketing team for Cabela's, which is a large independent retailer, where my responsibility was also to hire other agencies. So I kind of feel like I've been full spectrum on big, small hiring agencies, trying to get into different clients, and since have now been coaching and training agency owners on how to grow their business, leverage systems to scale.
Awesome. So when you first got started, how did you start landing your clients, or how did you make that transition from the big agency world to, okay, I'm going to open up my own shop and start working on the smaller?
Yeah. My first iteration before doing what we're doing now was focused on mobile marketing, mobile apps, text message marketing, websites. That was my experience for the better part of a decade. And also what I was kind of doing while I was at Cabela's. And when I was leaving Cabela's, I was really trying to build, I had a podcast talking about mobile. I had been speaking around mobile at a lot of online marketing conferences. I was at all of the events that have my ideal clients now, but talking about something different that at that time they weren't interested in. So people were interested in mobile at the time when I was getting started, and I had been in that space for a long time. And so when I first left, I was essentially going after like smaller versions of Cabela's, hey, learn what we're doing there, but how to do it on a smaller scale for your independent retail location. And that was what I was focused on in the early days. So kind of like helping people that aspired to be where I was already at. But then I pivoted from mobile into automation and marketing funnels, which led me on to where I'm at now. And that kind of tied to speaking at all of these events. I realized I wanted to serve online entrepreneurs, the Amy Porterfields, the John Lee Dumases of the world that have all these amazing podcasts. I was like, those are more my people. I'd love to be able to serve them. So I started going to those events. I got on their podcasts, sharing the mobile message, but like there was no way for me to serve them. So, years go by of me just kind of building those relationships. And then finally I just decided to switch something. And I said, hey, which one of you guys needs help with Infusionsoft? And that was, very shortly the revenue from that business surpassed what I had been doing, trying to sell the mobile marketing consulting and training stuff to independent retail. So it was, I think, really came down to, who do you want to serve, and like what is a problem that they actually care about, and finding that match and finally hitting it took a little while, but that's what brought me into the space as I'm in now.
And so when you first made that transition and figured out that Infusionsoft was going to be that entry point, how did you go about that epiphany to starting to land clients? What were some of your early methodologies in terms of landing clients as it relates to the Infusionsoft service?
Yeah. So I had just gotten certified in Infusionsoft because I was really starting to fall in love with the concept of automation. And again, like I said, I had thankfully had a lot of these relationships where I've been building up this relationship equity, so to speak, over the course of years, where I never asked for anything, just because they became friends, And so, I went to people like John Lee Dumas and was like, hey, I know you use Infusionsoft. Like, can we chat about your struggles, your pains around that? If I were to offer you a service to help you with that, would that be of interest? Yeah. Okay, cool. Let me go figure out what that might look like. I had a handful of those conversations with people that I had already known that were using Infusionsoft. And through those early conversations and a couple referrals from those early people, we were able to get to 10 clients fairly quickly, where we were charging at that time a month-to-month retainer. When I launched the business, it was supposed to be like the WP curve for Infusionsoft. For those of you that remember WP curve, which is like the unlimited WordPress support for like $100 a month. Well, we did unlimited Infusionsoft support for, at the time, it was like anywhere from $300 to $500 a month, which we learned was a horrible idea. And then from there, we upgraded our pricing and kind of changed the model a little bit. But that's really how I got started, is just through some initial connections, talking to folks that had that tool to understand what their pain point was, and then offering them a solution to kind of take that off their shoulders and off their plate. I did one thing that I think is important. I structured all of those deals, those early ones, as a 3-month trial. I went in saying, hey, like, I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't even know what you actually need. We're going to have to get in there, look around. I'm willing to do whatever you need for 3 months, but for this price. And knowing that there's probably going to be, you're getting the deal here. But at the end of 3 months, like, I want a testimonial, and I want, the ability to renegotiate based on what we've learned that you actually need. If you're cool with that, like, let's do it. And we got a handful of those. So that kind of allowed me to go in and do the work to figure out what I liked, what I didn't like, what do I want to keep doing, what do I want to stop, and then renegotiate those. And that worked really, really well for us.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea for sure. Being able to set a time period to discover, bake in that testimonial, and ultimately make them that irresistible offer, $500 unlimited infusion back in the day. So inevitably, when you're starting up a company, there are challenges. So what were some of the earlier challenges, other than the pricing model, that you kind of faced there and kind of had to, I guess, learn through as you were taking on these new clients in a service that you were just wrapping your head around?
Yeah. One was just the amount of customization was a huge challenge. I was still very new to Infusionsoft, right? Like, I understood the marketing element. I'd say pretty dangerous when it came to implementation, but I didn't know all the bells and whistles. So very, very quickly, I brought on someone part-time to help me who had a lot more experience than I did, so that I could keep selling. So I think some challenges were just the amount of customization, the amount of really time tracking. In that model, it's like the notion is unlimited, like sort of like 1 or 2 tasks at a time. We weren't tracking hours. We weren't, doing any of that stuff. And, later down the road, that was something that sort of backfired. Was, a handful of clients were eating up 80% of the bandwidth. When you looked at, if we were charging hourly, we were losing money on a handful of them, but those handful were preventing us from actually taking on new clients. So we kind of reached that capacity issue very early on. So I think, not just arbitrarily choosing your pricing and actually like forecasting that's something that we now teach, and there's ways to do that. That was a challenge. And then also the pricing, I think the amount of customization, and then I guess sort of a blind spot, which it felt good in the beginning, was the great thing was all of these clients came on essentially on a retainer. So we only sold retainers, which is great for us. And now to this day, I realize that I'd say, and this is a made up number, but if I had to guess, it'd be over 90% of agencies that charge retainers are really doing so for their own benefit, not for their clients. Most of them should probably be project-based, unless you're like managing people's ads or paid traffic, things that are constantly changing. I think that actually leads to the agency trap, which we found ourselves in, where, okay, after 6 months of being able to do pretty much anything, you kind of run out of some things to do, right? And then they're asking you, well, what else can you do? Because they're paying you, and then that's where you start saying yes, because you don't want to lose the client. And very quickly, your scope of work just keeps expanding. And, it's really difficult to manage, especially when it comes to creating any sort of acquisition or delivery systems that allow you to remove yourself. So it's like the retainer is great in the beginning because it kind of adds that stability. But at some point, I usually see between 4 and 6 months is, okay, well, now you're just starting to add things because you're desperate not to lose that client. And that was a challenge that we faced right around that time.
Awesome. So as you made the transition from basically being an Infusionsoft expert or implementer for your clients, eventually that scope creep came in. How did you make the challenge into more of a marketing area for your clients, and kind of your evolution as to where you are today? It sounds like you've reinvented yourself a couple of times. So how did that process play out?
Yeah, that's one thing that my friends say about me. They're like, you've reinvented yourself really quickly. Like you went from being the mobile guy to being the funnel guy, like really fast. It was pretty crazy. I mean, honestly, it's a constant iteration, and that's, something that I think our clients have been experiencing too, that there's multiple stages depending upon how deep in the kind of agency retainer game you might be. The evolution and iterations to get to where we're at now might be 3, 4, 5 steps. And, depending upon where your revenue is at, if say you're doing 50 something a month, to just throw away all those clients is not usually an option for most people. So like making the pivot like that is really difficult. So you kind of gotta, there's some finesse to it and math. So for us, it was everything Infusionsoft. Then we said, okay, well, what do we like? What do we not like? We realized that we liked building the quote unquote, the engines, not the day-to-day management of Infusionsoft, like the reports and the sending of broadcasts and all of that stuff. I have this podcast called The Engine Builder versus the Pit Crew. And, at that 4 to 6 month mark, we sort of became the pit crew of like changing the tires and filling the gas instead of like, cause we had already built the engine, Right. And I think that happens to a lot of agencies. So for us, we're like, all right, well, what engines have we been building that have been helping clients get like where they say the most of the value came from? And at the time it was like evergreen webinar funnels, live webinar funnels. It was those two. And then there was some like new client onboarding stuff that we had done to really streamline how they welcome new clients. Like those are the 3. The 4th was like migrating people to Infusionsoft, but we hated that because it was just always just really messy. So we just eliminated that one, even though it was something that people wanted. We just didn't want to be the person doing it. Sure. So then we had 3 packages. So we positioned those 3 packages on the front end, and then said, okay, on the back end, you can continue getting this service and support as a recurring retainer. Here are the things that we'll do. We'll help you launch new webinars. We'll do X, Y, Z. Then we realized that because of the people that we worked with, which were online influencers for the most part, they usually had an ads person and either wrote their own copy or had a copywriter. So we kind of found ourselves, and I think this has to do with the fact that we kind of got into the market through one particular tool where we were kind of like the main ingredient / thread that kind of brought all of these pieces together versus I didn't need to go get a copywriter. I didn't need to go do ads for them. So we were kind of protected in that way, which I didn't realize at the time, but was very beneficial. Yep. Because that allowed us to then say, like where we were getting scope creep would be client comes in, they want a webinar. We built out the webinar. We're just waiting for the copy. And then that takes forever. And then by the time they get the copy, the entire scope of work has changed. And like all of the work we did was now needed to be redone. And, trying to get that renegotiated was usually difficult. So we started creating standards around how we would implement. And hey, like we don't start building until we have these assets. So if this is your deadline, this is when we need those assets by, or else you don't get it by that date. And you're signing an agreement that says that. Then we realized, oh, well, if that's the case, why don't we just teach them how to insert their copy? Because that's a copy and paste job. And that allowed us to start taking on multiple clients at a time without having to worry about when will the work finally come back to us. And then we have like 40 projects all at once. And that was where like the starting to weave in elements of education and training and the done with you aspects started creating that leverage for us where, we weren't getting pulled back into that scope creep. And then we realized that from a pricing perspective, most of the people we were turning down tons of business because our done for you rates were really high, and the caliber of people that we were getting came from these higher level people that most people couldn't afford us. So then kind of going back downstream to, hey, well, here's a more affordable way for you to do it. We'll show you how to do it, and then we'll kind of quality control it, became the next evolution. And that's just kind of turned into, now we're this kind of hybrid, I call it the hybrid agency. It's like elements are done for you and, critiqued through us. And you have access to us and the team for like technical support on certain things. But a lot of it is coaching and pre-recorded training and elements like that.
So it's more like a productized service, walking them through what they need to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely specific outcomes, at least from our front end perspective, that they're looking to achieve.
Awesome. So today, since you've morphed into this, how are you currently finding your clients?
A combination of our own paid acquisition, Facebook. We get leads through our podcast and YouTube channels. Speaking are kind of the main organic methods. I mean, a lot of times we'll get people into our funnel through, say, paid acquisition, but then they'll be on our list for a year before ever pulling the trigger. But they've been through, like they're in a nurture system where they're continually engaged with our content. So I'd say the accelerant is the Facebook ads for us. And then the rest is like a lot of the organic behaviors, content creation that sparks the inbound.
Awesome. So you work with a lot of agencies. What is the size that you typically start to work with people where they're coming in for your service? Is there a certain like monthly revenue that they're hitting where things are breaking in their business and they need your help?
Yeah, it's super interesting. I find that I think there's enough content and education out there that people are aware of what to avoid, that we're getting people that are interested in systemizing and productizing earlier. So, I mean, usually there's like our clients kind of at the floor are like 10 to 15K a month with like an established, with established clients. Usually that kind of the wall that they hit where they're like, okay, like I just can't break past this, is somewhere between like the 30 and 40K a month mark, is where I feel like if they're still too generalized and doing too much custom stuff, they're really starting to feel it. We blew past that because we were a little bit more productized, even though we weren't fully productized. Like we had somewhat of a narrow niche and simplified deliverables that we got stuck at, 55, 65K a month, where it's like breaking through that became the equation of, well, every X new clients, I need X new team members. And when I started having that conversation with myself, that's when I realized I'm like, oh, I'm going to be going back to what I was essentially doing in agency days. And that's not what I wanted. There's a better way to do this. So yeah, I see some people, depending upon how streamlined they are when they get to us, come to us around 40, 50K a month. And they're like, we've been stuck there for 2 years. We're feeling it. I can't keep doing it this way. But then there's some people that are like, 10, 20, I don't want this to happen to me. I'm like, I'd rather start solving this now.
For sure. So what is the first thing that you typically see? So somebody that hits that inflection point, it sounds like it's 30. Definitely there's some variability there. A lot of times what I see anyways is that sticking point changes depending upon the number of partners and how much capacity they really have. There's some flexibility there. So what are some of the early things that you have them do in terms of systematization and automation? Some quick wins that people who are watching this could start to think about in terms of, hey, I'm having that problem. It's time to reach out to Greg.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll caveat this with what's funny about our journey was, or I guess ironic, is we wanted to be the guys that just helped agency owners and other people build out automated sales and delivery systems. And when they'd come to us ready to build, because like, I think most agency owners would be like, yeah, I want an automated system that brings me leads and great clients. Like who wouldn't, right? And be like, all right, well, what do you sell? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, what's like, what are people buying from you? And they're like, oh, well, it's like, different proposals, projects. I was like, how did they get there? And like, nothing was repeatable or standardized or uniform at all. And I was like, oh, that's why you don't have this thing that you want, because you don't do the same thing over and over and over again. It's unique every single time, which might as well just be a unique, you're essentially starting a new business every single time you get a client. And so that's kind of what brought us into figuring out the whole productization game, which now seems to be like the leading piece of our puzzle. But a few things really is starts with simplification. And by that, I mean narrowing down your niche, and then simplifying your deliverables. Narrowing down your niche, I'd say for most agency owners, in many cases will be, hey, you can't serve chiropractors, coaches, dentists, HVAC. You can't do all of those things. And small business is not a niche. Like you need to like really drill that down. Now, in some cases, niche, like niching down perfect or small enough, so to speak, can be like, call it like industry type, like, we serve chiropractors. But it can also be problem based. And usually those ones are better, where you might have a couple different types of businesses that have the exact same problem that you can market. So, this is where you see a lot of people focused on like lead generation companies that are focused on creating appointments. Like a lot of different types of service-based businesses need appointments, right? And many of them have a similar sales structure when it comes to appointments. So you could go after chiropractors, med spa, dentists, like things like that, where they all essentially need the same solution, just slight tweaks.
Yep.
As you keep expanding that though, when you start seeing like different software and, platforms that they have to rely on, that's where it starts to get muddy. So it can be problem-based. So we have to eliminate things that you're doing right now, which is usually the hardest thing for most people. When it comes to the simplification of deliverables, I think where productization gets confusing for some is, you'll have someone that maybe does websites or landing pages plus SEO plus paid traffic. And they're like, oh, well, like, I don't want to just do paid traffic or just do SEO. And it's not like productizing down to a particular service. It's productizing down into a solution, instead of right now, how most agencies are, if you're listening and you kind of categorize yourself as a generalist, your product is the word yes, right? Like, yes, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And that's what's added to your service menu that is inherently preventing you from growth. And so if you look at what are the combination of services that I can, in my skill set, that I'm good at, that I enjoy doing, that deliver value to my client, that solve a specific problem, and you package those up into an end-to-end deliverable, your life will be a bajillion times easier. So it's not just like, you got to be the SEO guy. It's, all right, well, we had a client, Cindy, who she did focus on HVAC, but she do full-blown website development. They do SEO, they do PPC, both Facebook and Google. And I was like, all right, like if you could only serve, like, what do your clients need? Leads. Okay, how do you get those leads? Well, these combination of these three things. We do a landing page, SEO, and we're better at Google than we are Facebook, but people want Facebook. I was like, all right, delete Facebook, no more full-blown websites, only do the landing pages that your SEO and your traffic drive to. And now they have a bare bones lead generation solution. Can you sell that? Yes. Cool. Now she has that as a front-end package. She can go sell a full-blown website later, but like some of these customized things that get in the way of actually solving the problem is what creates the bloat and creates the problems that most agencies fall into of just becoming generalists. So again, like how do you look at what is the problem? Like, why did people hire you? And you need to go beyond just if the answer is truly labor, then you have a problem, right? Like and that's why you're getting paid hourly or having trouble demanding and controlling premium rates, is because you're not solving a problem that really matters to them. So when I think productized, I think of, how do you sell an outcome? And then what's the fixed price, the fixed deliverables, and the fixed turnaround time, and even the fixed process. The client doesn't necessarily need to know that process, but they could, to solve that problem and give them that outcome. that's an offering that is now the only thing you sell. So that's kind of where we start. So for some people, it's like, it's deleting and eliminating some of the things that they do, which, for many will be scary, but there's a lot more scalability in less and doing less than there actually is in doing more.
Absolutely. So a lot of wisdom just got dropped there. So hopefully people are taking note, because that simplification of the system, removing work for the sake of work and focusing willing to pay to solve, is really what gives you the access to that premium pricing, focusing in on a niche, but by your definition, niche is really a specific problem that requires a process that could be applied to different businesses that have the same kind of outcome they're looking for. So I think there's a ton there that people can get from that.
Yeah.
One question I'd love to ask, because you've not only done this for your business, you've witnessed it for a lot of businesses. What are 3 things you wish you would have known earlier in your journey? So if we travel back to, 10 years ago when you're starting out, 15 years ago when you're starting out, if you're thinking back to where people are now starting their marketing agencies and wanting to go through this journey, what are 3 key pieces of advice you'd give to a younger version of yourself?
For me, I was, having kind of come up in mobile pre-iPhone, seeing the iPhone come out. I was like, mobile is the future. I was so hung up on like mobile being the solution. But the people that we were serving at the time, independent retail, like they still weren't even doing email, right? And so like the sales process to like now educate them on mobile, show them that they even have a problem in the first place, that mobile is the solution, was like super excruciatingly painful. So when I was like, oh, all these people are struggling with Infusionsoft, like there is pain here. Like we went from like 6-month sales cycles to 1 call closes, like overnight once we started figuring that out. And so it's really is fall in love with the problem, I think, that your ideal client has, which kind of leads me into like the second thing, which I think will probably ruffle some feathers, but I have a solution for those that get ruffled, is like I think personally, like you need to be your best client. And I know for some agencies that's harder because like you serve dentists and you were never a dentist. You just got in that market because there was money. And so like, if you can't be your best client, I think you need to find the thing that you fall in love with within your business. Like for me, in those early days of us doing Infusionsoft, we were serving course creators, and I was still having some friction around marketing and messaging because like I had never sold courses. I had just been behind the scenes of people that sold courses. And once I started flipping that, how we do all the same stuff, but for service providers and agency owners, I had endless amounts of content. Like I could relate to them. I could talk to them, which made selling and marketing way easier because I was that person. So I think the more that you can lean into being your best client, the more likely you are to succeed. But also when it gets hard, because it's going to be the thing that is going to help you get through, because you're probably more in love with that person and like you're in it for the long haul, right? Like I just love working with agency owners and service providers because like I know how I felt, I know how they felt, and I can help them like get through it. And like I'll always be fulfilled doing it, right? If I was like serving dentists and like I could care less about them, the second business growth becomes a challenge, it's going to be kind of hard. So the quick side to that, to ruffle the feathers, is if you don't love the ideal client, like fall in love with like maybe the element that you have of growing your own business. Like we have clients like one of my mentors, Russ Perry, Design Pickle, right? He even says, he's like, do I love graphic design like for brochures? No. He's like, but I love building my team. Mm-hmm. And like, we know we can impact a lot of people. So while I'm not like head over heels in love with simple graphic design, I can build my team for life. And like, I fall in love with that process. So like, that's like an angle that you can look at. So number 1, fall in love with the pain, not the solution. 2, be your best client. 3, I would say, this one's more of a recent one, honestly, is, I wish I could have told myself this even 2 years ago, is spend the time to figure out what it is you want. I think with these podcasts like this, reading books and hiring coaches and mentors, it's very easy to, and I've been guilty of this, of just sort of without even knowing it, adopting someone else's goals and or definition of success. And it's like entering a race you didn't know you were in. And that's why you feel like you're losing, because like you didn't even know you were in a race. And you see it a lot with like how to build a 7-figure this or an 8-figure that, or, in front of the Lambos and all these things. And all of a sudden you're like, why did I get a Rolex? You're like, when did this become important to me? Sort of thing. Not that I did that, but like, just as an example, you just got to like really, and it takes time. Like I literally spent 3-4 months just like journaling on like, what do I want? Why do I want this? What does that mean? Do I care more about fame, or do I care more about fortune, or like, what does that look like? And it uncovered a lot of things for me where I was like, man, I was just like chasing this thing over here because I literally just never sat there long enough to decide what I wanted. And so, yeah, figure out what you want, because you might be in a race that you never entered or knew you entered.
Awesome. So what's one thing you've spent $250 on in the last couple of months? Doesn't have to be marketing related, that you're really enjoying.
These glasses from Pixel. They're the blue blocking glasses. Oh, cool. Obviously, many of us are on screens a lot. I don't wear them necessarily during these interviews, but like, man, I don't know if you guys get headaches being behind the screen for a long time, and or if you work into the evening, you can't fall asleep because you've been looking at the screen because of the blue light. These were $99, and man, like from headaches at the end of the day to wearing these, and like my eyes aren't just wide open, keeping me from falling asleep, have been, a lifesaver.
Where did you get them?
The company's called Pixel. Just like Pixel glasses. You'll see I have tons of different options. There's a bunch of companies. I have a pair of Swanwicks, which have like the orange lenses, which you see a lot of people wear, which are really more for like the evening.
Okay.
Kind of the clear yellowish tinted ones are like daytime. But yeah, they've been really helpful, and only like $100.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Greg, really appreciate you taking the time. For those of you watching, feel free to drop a comment below. And if you like the episode, definitely smash that thumbs up button for us. And thanks a lot for taking the time and sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hope it was helpful.